The NVIDIA Game Experience should be automatically starting when you start Windows. If not, you need to get it to start doing that. If it is, then every time you start your computer, it'll start running and there'll be a little icon right down here. That could be hidden, and if it is, then you need to either look for it in here or go to Customize and find it, and here it is right here. And then set that to show icons and notifications. That way it's always showing down here on the right, and then if you want to get to it, you just right click, open up the Game Experience, and there you go. For settings, under Preferences, in general, I set it to automatically download drivers and updates, but let me choose when to install, and then I tell it to notify me when they're ready. I do that so it doesn't automatically install new drivers. I usually wait a few weeks after a new driver comes out before I install it, just to make sure there aren't any problems with it. Under the ShadowPlay preferences, I set the status indicator, which is right here, to be in the upper right hand corner. It's a little circle that tells you what ShadowPlay is doing. And I set the frames per second counter, the FPS counter, to be in the upper left hand corner right here. It's not going to let me do it because it's recording right now, but the way you do that is just click on status indicator right here, and then click on this position here, and that'll put the status, that'll put the status indicator here, then click on FPS counter here, and then click the upper left hand box here of the little screen, and that'll give you this display here with the frames per second on this side and the status indicator on this side. I tell it to have microphone always on, and that way it does the automatic voice detection. Here's where you set your keyboard shortcuts, with the most important one being Alt F10. That's where you tell ShadowPlay to save the last X number of minutes. I have mine to always record in a 20-minute loop. If there's something else on your computer that uses Alt F10 as its shortcut, then you may want to change this to some other key combination that's not used by your computer. It defaults to Alt F10. And then down here is where you tell it where to save the ShadowPlay recordings. You can see I'm setting mine to save on my D drive in a directory right off the root called ShadowPlay Recordings. And then there's a temp directory where it stores its temporary files. And you can see that here. Here's my D drive, ShadowPlay Recordings. And then, here's desktop recordings like what I'm recording right now, the temp folder, and then here's where it puts all the Hunter videos that I tell it to save. But you set those directories right here by clicking on that and picking where you want it to put them. And then finally for ShadowPlay, bring up this little box here. And for me, I set the mode to shadow and manual. I set the time to 20 minutes. You can set that to whatever you want it to be. I set the quality to medium. If you set it to high, the files are just gigantic. And I set the audio to in-game and microphone. That way it records the game sounds and TeamSpeak if I'm using TeamSpeak. And then of course the other thing you do is you toggle this little power button here to on. Obviously if it's toggled off, then it's not recording. But I leave it on all the time. So then the way it works is it's not recording until you start a game. And then as soon as it sees you start a game and the screen goes into graphics mode, the recording starts, and you'll see the little status indicator. In fact, here it is on this computer because I've got it set for desktop recording right now. You set the desktop recording right here. There's a checkbox right here that I've got checked, which is how I'm making this video. Normally you want that to be off, unchecked, because you don't want it recording when you're just at your Windows desktop. But to make a video like this, I turned it on. But if that's turned off, then it only records if you're playing a game. And that's pretty much it. Just set this up the way you want it, put it to on, make sure that the game experience is automatically loading every time Windows is running. That way you see this little icon down here, and then anytime you start the game, it'll automatically be recording. And then obviously if you don't ever hit Alt F10 to save, it's not using any disk space because it just disregards those temporary files. Or if you want to force it to record, you can hit Alt F9, which is the manual recording mode. Alrighty.